Okay, let's go ahead and jump in here. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining this webinar on self-care.
Mhm.
And so I'm Phil Herman. I'm a partner at the Impact Group. I've been at the Impact Group for a little over 2.5 years, but my entire experience in terms of my professional career up until that point was as an educator and as a school administrator for over 22 years. And as a school administrator, I would often come into the school year with these incredible intentions and proactive strategies to start the year off, yeah, coming off of a summer, refreshed and ready to go. And it wasn't very long before I was in a very reactive mode in most years, and to the point where I know that so many educators, so many people in boards of DD and in cities and villages and parks and service industries really are so servant-minded that we just give our all in serving others. And we often end up in a very reactive state trying to juggle all those responses. And ultimately, sometimes we forget about ourselves in that process. And so that's what we're talking about today. And we are so fortunate to have Ms. Speaks with us today, Shannon Speaks, who is the our founding partner, Tom Speaks' wife. And I've learned more about mindfulness and self-care in the last 2 years from Shannon than anyone else. And so we're very fortunate to have her with us today. Shannon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. That means a lot to me. I was just taking that in what you just said, so thank you for that. Yeah, so I'm Shannon Speaks. I'm delighted to be partnering and collaborating with the Impact Group this morning. I know how many amazing people the Impact Group serves out there in the world taking care of others. And it's hard to include yourself. It really is. We don't tend to be trained that way. And I can relate. I too, I'm a caregiver. I've been a caregiver professionally and personally forever. And so I understand how we can develop this skill set at taking care of others and then manage to forget making space for ourselves. I've got good news though. I've got really good news. Uh, it's a transferable skill.
There we
If
go.
you if you find yourself to be excellent at giving care for others, I just want you to put that in your back pocket that this is a transferable skill. You can transfer that skill to the self. And that's what we'll be talking about today. I should mention too, I'm an independently licensed social worker, a certified mindfulness teacher, certified coach. I have my own business called Nourish, whole person coaching and counseling. I also serve as a therapist at a nonprofit called Kelly's Grief Center. And so I serve a lot of different roles. I partner with other agencies who have people taking care of others. So happy to be here today.
Thank you so much. So, what are we covering today? We're talking about our individual definitions of self-care. We're going to look at a back to the basics approach towards self-care, and Shannon's going to talk to us a little bit about that. We're going to explore this concept of it's not the what that is happening in our lives that's the problem, but sometimes it's our how and our who. And so we're going to try to explain that. And as we think about how, we're also going to explore some practices and practical strategies and examples of practical strategies that we could put in place in our own lives. And then lastly, we'll wrap up with what does this mean for us as leaders and communicators? Why is it something that the Impact Group as a communications firm is even exploring? So let's go ahead and jump in. Shannon, you want to talk to us about definitions of self-care?
Yeah, sure. Well, I really posed that question in the homework assignment. And so I'll just put this assignment back out again. And, the topic today is um, preparing, like creating success for yourself as it relates to self-care. And so it just begs the question, like, what does successful self-care look like to you? And it's a highly individualized thing. So I'm just inviting everybody here and everyone listening later to take a moment and ask yourself, okay, if I'm being successful in the arena of self-care, what does that even look like in my life? How would I even know I'm being successful in my own self-care? So really, what if we all took 15 seconds right now and just pause some of the doing. Take things out of your hands. If they're in your hands right now, put them down, push them away, and take a moment to tune in. We do so much tuning out. Tune back in and just ask yourself, do I even know what a successful self-care practice is? Or what might my life look like if I was being successful in this area? And you might even jot down a couple words, like what are some words that pop up? And if you feel like sharing in the chat, by all means, if it's not too personal, put it in there. What does it look like for you? Self-care is definitely a unique to each and every one of us experience. And so even though Phil and I are talking about it in general terms a lot, I really hope that you can apply it to yourself. Or we've got intentionally creating a good balance for both physical and mental well-being. Yes, Christy, that's great. That's really great. And I just want to chime in too and mention, mind if I talk about that who,
Go
Phil?
ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Because like Phil was saying, we spend I know, easier said than done. Agreed,
Yeah.
Christy. We spend so much time on the what. I don't know about you, but maybe when you were thinking about what does self-care look like for me? Maybe you start thinking about, well, I would do this, I would do this, I would do that, I would do this. Lots of doing. We spend a lot of time being human doings and not as much time being human beings. And so when we're talking about getting back to the basics, the other idea is, okay, there's a lot of what in our lives. There's a lot we can be doing, but how are we being with ourselves? And who, what's the who behind the what? And so that's the other invitation here as we really do get back to the basics. And before you start thinking about all the things you need to do, what if you could tune back in into who you are and what would self-care look like for your who? And that's when I love that Christy mentioned this idea of the physical and the mental, because one of the other things when Phil and I were talking about this, we were talking about taking a whole person approach to taking care of your who. And I wonder what that means to you guys. Might anybody want to chime in? Or even Phil, what's it mean to you when I say whole person?
Yeah, certainly. I I think about the one word that comes to mind when I think about self-care for me is peace. But I
Mm,
know that when there are parts of my life that get out of whack, I have trouble finding a peace, or I'm self-centered. I don't think I ever like stay in a place that's peaceful all the time, but it's usually tied to those different components. Is it something that physically out of whack? Mentally, spiritually, in my relationships. It's those big domains that when I think about whole person, it's those big areas.
mhm. That's right. And so back to the basics. What if everybody here took just a moment and asked yourself, all right, what are the big domains for me? And maybe they're the ones that Phil just described. You might jot down physical, emotional, social, spiritual, mental. Did I say mental or cognitive, intellectual? And just jot each one of those down and then tune back in and ask yourself at the most basic level, what what do I need in my own self-care when it comes to my physical self? And then just, this is one tool that we're inviting you to utilize, which is just to tune back in, look at yourself as a whole person, and ask yourself, you might start with even just, how do I even feel right now physically? How do I even feel right now spiritually? And then ask yourself after that, well, what do I need? What do I need in light of how I feel in this moment? And the cool thing about it is then the doing part of living life, we can't just be, not we all work, we all have lives and relationships, like Phil said. And so what if our doing was born out of our being? And so what if we could be a little bit more with ourselves first? And then our actions are probably a lot more skilled. That's the hope.
Yeah, Shannon, I think that's such a powerful concept, and that you and I have talked about before. This tuning into our own intuition. I mean,
Yeah.
we are bombarded by messages of what we should be doing. Of course, our phones are listening to us or whatever. And was complaining about my hips hurting from running the other day, and so now I have all these articles popping up about all the things I need to be doing for the hip stretches. But like whether it's Instagram or Facebook or our news feeds, we're constantly being told of this is what you should be doing. And you've introduced the concept to me of, well, what if you just listen to yourself about what you should be doing? What if you should just listen to your own body about what your body's telling you need to be doing? What if you listen to your own spirit? What if you listen to the relationships and what they're telling you about what you should be doing? I think that's a really powerful concept as we think about self-care and as we think about getting back to some of the basics. One of the basics is just listening to who listening to ourselves, listening to what our own bodies, minds, spirits are telling us.
Oh man, amen. It's so true. I'd love to know in the if this is resonating with anybody, maybe you could make a little reaction. And I just love to see if this is hitting home for folks because it really is so true. Um, but to listen to the self, like you were just saying, Phil, it means that, we sometimes it means we have to step away from all the noise, and it's
Mhm.
hard to do, and or turn down some of the volume on all the other things, and the volume is so high, and it comes and goes. There's different seasons of our lives. I imagine at the beginning of the school year for many administrators and teachers, and it's the volume is high, very high on the external. And so how might you step away from all of that noise and allow yourself a little bit of time to hear your own inner self on occasion? And so here's another practical tip. Like the first practical tip was this idea of having first a vision of your own success. So starting with the end in mind is really one of the first tips. Preload yourself. Do tomorrow's self a favor and think about your own self-care ahead of time. The second tip is this idea of being with yourself and tuning in before you actually take any of the action, and looking at yourself as a whole person in all the different domains that are important to you, and tuning in and asking, how do you feel and what do you need? And then taking skillful action from there. And then I just got myself kind of lost because I reviewed for a minute and I forget the last question that you had, Phil. What was the most recent question you were asking?
I don't know. We were talking about our back to the basics approach to self-care and what we mean by that, how we define it
Yes.
for ourselves, and where we're headed. Though I think is the difference between the what and the
Yeah.
who and how.
Yes.
So again, you've shared with me before that it's not the what that is our problem in self-care.
Hmm.
It is the who that you're talking about right now, and then
Yes.
also the how.
Yes.
And so,
Yeah.
explain
The
to us what you
how.
mean by that in terms of the differences.
Yeah. Great question. The how. I mean, one big important tip to take away too is pausing. There's one how. How do we even tune into the who? We got to pause. And I think this is what we were going to, where we were going a little bit ago, which is just turning down the volume. Another tip is to figure out for yourself what in my life takes me away from my own inner voice, and how might, yes, you have to do those things, but am I carving out any time to tune in? So that's that other tip. Carve out time for yourself to tune back in to your own inner voice and check in with what you need. Uh, that's the who, getting back in touch with your who, so that the what, and we have plenty of what's happening and plenty of other people who would love to tell us what self-care is. And what we're doing this morning is a different approach to self-care. If you just kind of look up self-care on the internet, it'll have a lot of things like take a bubble bath, go get a massage. I mean, normally everything you'll see has a dollar sign attached to it. People are just trying to sell us stuff. There's nothing to be sold here. Here's what we're selling. We're selling you on yourself, to go back to yourself. It's free, free of charge, that you can just come back to your own wisdom. What a cool idea. What if you already know the answer? What if you don't need to rely on Pinterest or Instagram or anything else to tell you? What if you already know? I believe you do. And I believe it's just a matter of hearing it and listening in so that you can connect with that, be with it, and then discern for yourself what you need to do next on your own behalf.
Yeah. And as we think about that concept of the who and the how, and also back to the basics.
Yeah.
Again, for those of you on the webinar, the who is you, and listening to that, your own intuition. The how is going to be a little bit different for each of you as well. The my how is going to be a little bit different than your how, because our bodies, our minds, our spirits are going to tell us different things that we need to do to care for ourselves. And so when we think about some of those big domains, those areas, and we think about examples of back to the basics,
Mhm.
Shannon, what do you see as some of those examples? I know that just this morning, I was talking to Tom. He was asking me how my run was this morning. I said it was actually really fast, like unusually fast for me. And that was, I said, it's amazing how I'm realizing more and more and more that sleep and hydration are like the two keys to like how fast I run and how I feel during a run, like sleep and hydration. So for me physically, he said, what's interesting about that is you guys are talking about that today. That's not just on runs, that's like in life, like sleep and hydration. So those are like two of my back to the basics pieces that I'm learning now at this age in my 50s. I'm learning, oh, sleep is important, hydration is important, but it makes a huge difference. It's one of my back to the basics self-care. If I can just meet those benchmarks, a lot of other things go better. What are some other examples like that as we think about physically, mentally, socially, spiritually?
Yeah, that's a great example. And I'm right there with you in the 50s. And I mean, lucky us that all along we didn't have to think about it too much, but now we do. Now we do. Uh, yeah, so when it comes to even our psychological and mental well-being, truly those things you just described, sleep, oh man. I mean, if I'm sleep deprived, forget it. I'm not nearly as patient as I'd like to be. All kinds of things just sort of go out the window when those basic things are not met. It's just, and maybe it sounds so simple and you're like, yeah, I was looking for something more advanced out of this program. Well, guess what? It starts with the basics. It truly, truly does. And sometimes we get so advanced that we forget about the basics. So this is a big reminder for all of us. Okay, what if we peel it all back, what's at the foundations? I mean, sleep, yes. Moving our bodies. And it can, that's where it's also unique. Maybe not everybody's a runner in the group, but how are we moving our bodies? Um, Connection with other people too. That's so critical for many of us, whether we're introverted or extroverted or what the case may be. How we're being connected with other people is so important to our whole person health. I would love to ask folks to chime in and to hear if anybody else, if that's okay, Phil,
Yeah.
has like a like even a tip that works for you when it comes to your own self-care. And if you go back to the basics, what's something that you've used that's been helpful?
Either in the chat or unmute. You're welcome
Yeah.
to share.
Hmm.
Getting out
Mm,
in nature. Yeah, Christy, for sure.
absolutely. More see, look at that, more time in nature. Oh, spending time with family. Yep, yep. Actually, I'll just tell you a resource, by the way. There's a beautiful program called Nature's
Camping.
Prescription. Camping, again, being outside. I'm a big fan also of being outside. We tend to think that being in nature is somehow separate from us. There's us and there's nature, but I love reminding myself that I too am nature. We're all a part of the same thing. And that's why it feels so good to be out in it, because we're more connected to parts of ourselves out in nature. Those are great examples. Yep. What makes
Yeah.
it hard? Here's a question. Oh, sorry, Phil, were you about to say something?
No, go ahead and go with this, and then I'll come back to that point.
Okay. Yeah, phone detox for real, Lisa. I know. I need a little more of that in my life. Um, I'd love to know too from everybody, what makes it hard? What makes self-care hard for you sometimes? Like if you could identify what gets in the way, what would you say? And again, you can put it in the chat or try unmute and chime in. What's in between you and your own self-care? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Putting others
Putting
first.
others first. Yep. Just like what we were talking about at the beginning. Yep.
Exactly. It's so true. It is so, so true. I can so completely relate to that. Being tied to myself for work, connecting with others. Oh, I know. Yeah, Krista, that is so true. Oh, it is so hard.
I know, sometime for me over the years, others' expectations, meeting others' expectations of me, doing what I think others think I should be doing, as opposed to, again, listening back to my own tuition about what I think I need.
Mm-hmm.
But others' expectations, I know, has been a piece of what's made it hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's so funny about that too is that a lot of times it's just a story that we're making up. And so it can be helped to just get clear. And so that is a lot of what we're doing today too. We're just getting clear about ourselves and what we need, and maybe even what other people need. What's our role inside of what other people need? One of the greatest lessons I have learned in a lot of my training is allowing other people the dignity of their own experience, which means I'm not responsible actually for their experience. They are. And so anytime I muddle with it, I'm taking away their own dignity of their own experience. That has helped me stop feeling like there's so much that's mine that's not mine actually. And I just thought of that when you said other people's expectations, Phil, because another way to get clear is to check in with another person and ask, I just want to get clear on what your expectations are here. Um, is it this, this, and this, or tell me for sure. And that way you know
Yeah.
what the and then you can have a conversation too that says, oh, allow me to be clear. I can't do 2 and 3, but I'm happy to do 1. How's that?
Yeah.
Again,
And
easier said than done.
another thing that helped me sometimes, or helps me, that I need to remind myself of periodically, and sometimes in the morning if I'm reflecting or I'm thinking or practicing gratitude, I think about that this life is not a dress rehearsal. Sometimes sometimes I think like, oh, this is just the practice, and we'll get it right later, right? Later on, I'll get it right. Later on, I'll really do it the way I want to do it. Later on, I won't meet those expectations. Later on, I will get out in nature. Guess
Mm,
what? Nope, this is it.
This is it.
This is our one grand life, and reminding myself this life is not a dress rehearsal. And so if I don't think that I want to be meeting all those other expectations, if I don't think that I want to be following all the what you should do, but I need to be listening to myself, this is the time to do it. This is it. And so yeah, I think that having some of those little reminders, like you're talking about for us, that remind us of what is our priority, or I guess, what are our priorities, and what are our own back to the basics.
Yes.
Just some of those ones that we popped up in the chat. People know where they feel that peace, where they feel fulfilled, where they feel renewed. Then go get it. Go get it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's about carving out the time for sure. And that's where the preloading, I appreciated the approach to this particular webinar, which is to preload yourself. And I know, and now we're talking about a little bit of the what, and I know we're just about out of time, but when it comes to the what, here's an actual thing that you can do. You can, I mean, let's, block the calendar in particular times and put these things in there on your own behalf. Demonstrate that you're actually a priority for yourself. It's a beautiful example to others, too, especially for those of us who are taking care of others in our job, and then we go home and we take care of others in the home. People are watching us. And if you think about those that you're caring for and you want them to take care of themselves, of course we do. We want them to do what they need to do on their own behalf, and yet we are not. Talk about an opportunity for leadership. A true leader is going to demonstrate and embody these practices so that the people that they're leading go, oh, wait a minute, they're actually doing the thing. It's easy to talk about, like Christy said earlier, but it's a whole nother thing to do and be.
Yeah, Shannon, I think that's a great point, and it brings us back as we come close to concluding here. So why at the Impact Group are we talking about this topic? We work with leaders from all around the state and in neighboring states, in all sorts of different industries. And in working with them, we often are coming across leaders who are so giving, who are so focused on others, who are so driven to make that impact, that they are burnt. They are forgetting about caring for themselves. And we know that those that are able to have sustainable practices of caring for themselves and are listening to what their minds, bodies, spirits, relationships are telling them, we know that they're standing on a stronger foundation for leadership, and for communicating. They're able to more easily find their messages, and to communicate when they're coming from a place where they feel sustained, and they're able to sustain. And so that's a piece of why we're talking about this here today. Self-care is a path to sustainability, and leading and communicating from a strong foundation is essential to that sustainability. And so again, everyone's path is going to look a little bit different. And that's why I think Shannon started with the vision for your own success. That's really important, to spend some time stepping away, slowing down, listening to yourself in terms of what is that vision for your own success. Because when you have that, then you can put those back to basics approaches in place. Shannon, anything else you'd like to share as we wrap up today?
I think you just summarized it perfectly. And I guess I'll just bring it back to that first point that I mentioned, how this truly is caregiving is a transferable skill. And so when you think about how highly skilled you already are at taking care of others, what if you just take that beautiful skill set, and here's a crazy idea, transfer it over here to the self and see what happens. Do your own experiment. Oh, what would it look like if I took care of myself the way I take care of others? And I got one final point. I see we're at the end, but I just want to tell you too, when we realize we've lost the thread, when we realize, oh, I said I was going to try to do this and it's September and I'm already blowing it. The other way to be with yourself too is to have some grace and kindness, just like you would for the person you're taking care of. If the person you're taking care of is like, I blew it, you wouldn't be like, oh, you big dummy. No, you'd be like, well, hey, it's okay. It's okay. So what if you took that same grace that you have for others and you embodied it on your own behalf too? It takes practice, friends.
Shannon, thank you so much for giving of your time and your preparation for this webinar. Your insights are invaluable, so thank you for just taking the time to share that with all of us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you to those joined us and who joined us, and you'll see some of our follow-up communications coming out from the Impact Group. This webinar will actually be posted online later if you want to come back to any of these points from today. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.